He's an author, he's a film critic, he's the host of CTV's Pop Life, but his passion is raising funds for Abuse Hurts and sharing his journey through colon cancer. Welcome to My Kind Canadian. It's Richard Crouse. Hi there.
Hi, nice to see you.
It's been a minute. We were just trying to figure out when we last saw each other in the offices of Rogers. So I
Yeah,
think it's
I
been over
mean,
10 years.
oh, it must be, it must easily be. Yeah, yeah. I stopped doing a show that I did for a long time called Reel to Reel. You reminded me, it was 2008. That's probably the last time we saw one another.
And your hair still looks great. How do you do it
hmm
after all these years? You haven't
It's
aged a minute.
it's a lot of no, it takes no time at all. You glue it down once in the morning, and it just stays that way.
So you did this beautiful 7-part article on your journey through colon cancer, and it was so beautifully written that I felt every feeling that you were feeling. You are a wordsmith. How has your perspective on kindness and giving back, how has that changed or evolved since this big life event for you?
Well, it is a big life event. I mean, I write about this in that piece.
Mm.
That piece originally started off to be a book, and I wrote it
Ah,
as I was finishing up another book. I just finished a book that I wrote about Elvis Costello when all this happened, when I was diagnosed with cancer, and
mm,
I decided that I was going to I was in the groove of writing every day, and I found it therapeutic. So I wrote about everything that was happening, because once someone says you have cancer, everything is turned upside down, and in
mm,
a really big way. And I wasn't expecting it. I had no symptoms. I felt okay. Everything was fine. And then all of a sudden, for the next almost 2 years, it was just a litany of hospital appointments and surgeries and chemo appointments and that kind of thing. And so I thought that I would write my way through it all. At the same time, I didn't tell anybody except the very
mm,
closest circle around me what was happening. There were a few people that needed to know. Other than that, I didn't. I didn't even tell my father,
mm.
for instance, because he lived at that time, 3,000 miles away, and there was no point in upsetting him, because there was nothing he could do about any of this.
Right.
And I knew the prognosis was ultimately going to be good, and I didn't want people to pity me. So I wrote this kind of in secret. The idea was that it was going to be a book, and I think that the last time that I wrote anything of any substance in it was the day after I had my last chemo appointment. And I thought, you know what? I don't know if I want to continue writing about this. I think the therapy of putting it down on the page was enough. And I let it sit. I didn't do anything with it for a year, or probably more than that. And then over time, I began to realize that there had been a number of huge life changes that came along with being diagnosed with cancer. One was that the little stuff didn't matter anymore. The things that
Mm,
used to kind of get under my skin didn't matter. Professionally, things became far less important for me. Instead of being that guy that was aggressively always looking for the next gig or something different, or working myself into the ground trying to do 5 different things at once, I decided to not do that. And I decided that I was also going to go public with this. So the
mm.
the week the week after the chemo was done coincided with Colorectal Cancer Month. And so I was on a show at the time called Canada AM, and I went on and I announced it there and told my story, and then encouraged people to go get colonoscopies, which I still do. And then I let the book sit for a year, and then the following March I decided that I would put it out, but not as a book, because I didn't want to go back and rewrite and sort of relive all that stuff.
Mhm.
Instead, I thought I'd serialize it, put it on ctvnews.ca, and hopefully it would help people. And as we started putting it up, one piece at a time each week throughout the month of March, I started getting letters and phone calls
Uh,
and comments, and people would stop me on the street saying, I've just been diagnosed, and this really helped me. And because it was my honest reaction to what was happening. Some of it's funny, because some of the stuff that happens is super funny, and some of it isn't particularly
right.
funny. But I was just, I think, honest about how I felt at every step of the way. And that I think was reflected in the words, and hopefully, and I knock wood, I still hear about it. People still mention, you can still find it there. It's sitting there it's been up for years now,
Mhm.
and people still find it and read it. And the medical professionals have talked to me about it and said that it really is an honest look at what happens and what goes through your mind. And if that is what it is, and if it encouraged people to go get colonoscopies, if it made it easier for people going through what I went through, that's all I intended to do with it. It was not meant to be anything other than a useful guide. The Duke is a place on Queen Street in Toronto, and it's a massive place. They have live bands there. They've got a bar, and I love it because it is a slice of
Back,
life
isn't
in
it?
Toronto. There is every demographic in the world drinks at that bar. And if you stop by, it's always friendly, it's always fun. And they asked me, they said, would you come in? This was years ago now, and said, would you come in and bartend, on this day that we raise toys and money for Abuse Hurts? And I thought, of course, I bartended for
Mm.
many years ago, and so I know how to pour a draft, I know how to do all that stuff. And it was, for me, a way of giving back and raising awareness. And the first year we did it, we raised a lot of money, 15 or $16,000 in an
Wow.
afternoon. We did it again this year and raised a lot of money. So it goes to help people that just need a leg up. They just need a little bit of help during the holidays when a lot of people are feeling so
Mm.
the downbeat, and maybe it's not as happy a season as we see presented on Christmas cards
Right.
and on Christmas specials and that kind of thing. And so I'm more than happy to do it. I, as it turns out, don't think I'm a great bartender anymore. I once was, but I think those days are gone. And the Duke is sort of emblematic of that. And they have amazing bands, and the staff is super great, and they do a lot of work for charity. It's not just Abuse Hurts,
Oh,
but other charities as well. So they give back to the community that has given so much to them.
so you've done so many interviews, and I often wonder, when you watch these bad movies, you are still kind in your reviews because I think
Mhm.
you appreciate that this is someone's life's work.
Mhm.
So you've given a handful of 4.5s, Isle of Dog, Till. What makes a perfect 5 out of 5? Have you seen it?
There's no perfect 5 out of 5.
There's
I always say when I set out to review something that nobody sets out to make a bad movie. And so
right.
I just before we got on the line today, and I won't tell you what the movie was, but I saw something this morning that was absolutely terrible. And I just finished writing a
Oh,
review for it, but I kept in mind that they probably
kind.
didn't set out to make a terrible movie. But
Yeah.
people deserve to know. That's my job, is to tell people what it is. So I try and temper my reviews. I think the thing that people understand about my reviews is that they're never personal. If there's a movie star in it that has made a lot of bad movies, I'm not necessarily going to just take swipes at them, because nobody wins in that kind of situation. They don't set out to
Right.
make bad movies. Maybe it has just been a terrible confluence of events in their lives that led them to this place, which is, I think, what happened today. There are no 5 out of 5 reviews on my website or I've been doing this for 25 years. I've never given 5 out of 5 because once you see the perfect thing, I think that's it. There's no more. I don't like, well, why go on? Why watch any
You
more
can't
movies
top
when
it.
you see the perfect one? Yeah. So for me, a 4.5 movie is a movie that um, it transports me, that entertains me, that surprises me, and it can be a big all-out epic, something like Babylon, which I think I gave 4 out of 5 stars
Right.
to.
I saw that too, yeah.
Yeah, which is 3 hour and 15 minute epic, which is so over the top. It's so audacious. It swings for the fences in absolutely every sense of the word. And I think I said in my written review that people will either love it or hate it, and there are very valid reasons for both those responses. So I can give that 4 out of 5, but I can also give a movie like Living, which stars stars Bill Nye as a man who has spent his life doing everything that he thought a gentleman should do, and being very buttoned down in his life. And then he's diagnosed with cancer, and he realizes
Oh,
at a late stage in his life that he's never lived, and he's never really had fun. Someone says, you just have to get out there and live a life. And he says, I don't know how to do that. And it's an austere, really restrained movie. And it gets the same rating from me as Babylon, which is audacious and all over the place, because it affected me differently. So, can I say what exactly it is? No, I just know it when I feel it.
you've interviewed so many celebrities and personalities on Pop Life. Who's the kindest one? Who stood out to you with something, with a kind gesture or a call after?
You often hear back from people. That's not terribly unusual. For me, listen, I think that the kindness comes from their willingness to be open, their willingness to answer questions, and not be guarded. You can tell who
Mm.
is authentic and who isn't. Elvis Costello was amazing. We talked about
Uh,
everything from not only process and how he makes his records and that kind of thing, which I'm a geek for and will listen to all day, but I know not everybody is. But we also talked about his mother and how she came to see him
mm,
at the time recently perform at a venue in Liverpool, England, where she used to go dancing during the war, and
uh,
sort of grew up going to, and the effect that had on her, and him knowing that she was in the audience all those decades later. So I love those kind of things. I like people that are willing to put aside the kind of trappings of what it means to be a celebrity, and just talk in a very real way about things. I don't pry. I'm not the kind of interviewer that
mm.
tries to get people to cry, or get people to
Trick
reveal
them into
long
saying
lost
something.
secrets or
Yeah.
anything, or trick them into saying something. But I hope to have real conversations with people.
Now, one thing through your interviews that I've seen is that your guests are really impressed with your deep dive. You find these
Mhm.
little details that isn't like, so just tell me about your movie. There's something in
Mhm.
their life that you've found and you tell
Yep.
them. And then there's a real big element of surprise. And you know who this reminded me of, seeing as we're close in age, is Brian Lanahan. He used to
Mm.
do that all the time. He'd have one of these little tidbits and he would surprise them, and the person would instantly change their demeanor because they
Yep.
know you've done the homework, the dive, and that you care about these little details. Is that something you do, or that just comes to you, or do you
Well,
make an effort to do?
it's probably a technique. I mean, I used to live next door to Brian Linehan,
Oh,
and
did you?
and certainly
Oh, is
watched
that
him on
funny?
television a lot. And what he did was much different than I do, and it was much more difficult than what I do, because there was no internet when Brian Linehan was doing these interviews. So if he was doing research, he was going through this incredible library of books that he had, or going to the actual library and going through microfilm and doing this. Like, he spent hundreds of
Old
hours
school.
researching interviews. I spend hours and hours researching interviews. If we're doing a long deep dive with someone, I feel like it's important to show them the respect of knowing about what I'm talking about. And so often I'll go in to do an interview, and in some cases I feel like I know more about the person than they know, because than they know about themselves, because I have really dug deep to find things, and it pays off in the interviews. I like to break the mold of what most celebrity interviews tend to be, by asking questions that are either unexpected, or I asked Bobby Flay, for instance, about shopping at Sloan's grocery store, and he stopped the interview. It didn't stop the interview. We kept the cameras rolling, but he said, "How did you know about that? Nobody knows about that. Only people in my neighborhood knew about that." And it's those kind of moments that signal to the person that you're talking to that you've done the work, you've done the research, you know what you're talking about. And I find that instead of putting people on edge, it relaxes them, and they say, okay, I'm in good hands here, because this guy knows what he's talking about. And yeah,
There's a
so
trust and kindness that you're interested in their
Yeah.
real
And
story and
so
their
it's a
well-being.
technique. It's a technique. I think that probably I grew up watching Brian Lanahan, and my questions aren't as long as his, uh, because he liked to impart information in a way that I don't. I just don't have time for. But he had more time. Television was a slower pace back then, and so you could ask a question that went on for a minute or so. You can't
But
really
it's a
do that.
compliment, right? You take
Mhm.
that as a compliment. There's
Oh no,
a thing when
absolutely.
when you're yes, okay. And he
Yeah.
was your
Yeah.
neighbor. Isn't that too funny? See, I knew that. I must have done the deep dive before I got in. I knew exactly that he was your neighbor. So
Mhm.
that's what it is. So Richard, thank you so much for shining a light on the importance of kindness and giving back, and most especially for watching bad movies so we don't have to. And
Well,
this
it's
is
my
where
pleasure. Yeah,
entertainment
thanks for having me.
and charity meet.